Hi everyone, I'm Katherine Watson from Portland, Oregon. Imagine the heart-pounding, soul-crushing betrayal that rips through you like lightning. You're sacrificing every last shred of yourself, every exhausted evening fueled by scalding black coffee that scorches your throat and keeps your raw, stinging eyes open, quietly revolutionizing a crumbling community pantry that was one bad month away from closing its doors forever. All while the relentless Portland rain hammers your window like it wants to break inside and drown you. Your system, born from the deepest, most tender wounds of your childhood, finally brings light, warmth, and dignity to families who once lived the same nightmare you did, the air thick with the comforting, earthy scent of fresh donations that smell like second chances. But then a brazen, spotlight-hungry intruder storms in, plastering her smug, triumphant face over every fragile victory you bled for, while you're left sweating, trembling, tears burning behind your eyes as you haul box after heavy box alone in silence. The tension coils inside your chest like a spring wound so tight it hurts, until the fateful presentation when her entire house of lies collapses in a spectacular, gut-wrenching, world-shaking implosion, leaving her exposed, humiliated, and utterly broken, while you finally, after all these years, feel truly, achingly seen. This isn't just a revenge story, it's a raw, emotional reckoning that will leave your heart racing, your fists clenched, and your soul screaming in righteous, long-overdue fury. Every single night I came home drenched, my clothes clinging to my skin like a second layer of guilt, the rain never letting up, mirroring the storm raging inside me. I would collapse onto the couch, too exhausted to even turn on the lights, staring at the ceiling while replaying every moment I'd spent at the pantry. The thought of those families, mothers with hollow eyes, children clutching empty lunchboxes, kept me going when my body begged me to stop. I knew what it felt like to be invisible, to be the last in line, to be told there's nothing left. That knowledge was both my fuel and my torment. And yet, every time I finished another spreadsheet, every time I labeled another bin, I felt like I was clawing back a piece of myself I'd lost long ago. The pantry wasn't just a place, it was my battlefield against the past. Every organized shelf, every accurate inventory sheet, every grateful smile was a victory over the little girl who once stood in line crying silently because there was no food left. I poured everything into it, every sleepless night, every tear, every ounce of rage I'd swallowed for years. I told myself that if I could save even one family from the shame I'd known, it would all be worth it. And for a while, it was. Until the day Marcy walked through the door and turned my sanctuary into a war zone. The air thickens with the kind of suffocating anticipation that makes your pulse thunder so loudly in your ears you can barely hear anything else, the phantom smell of stale donuts and printer ink clinging to your memory like a ghost that refuses to leave. Picture the raw, visceral emotion tearing through you, the razor-sharp, bone-deep sting of being erased from your own story, the white-hot, blinding fury of watching a fraud steal the applause that should have been yours while your heart cracks open wider with every clap, and the electric, almost painful, almost unbearable thrill when karma finally strikes, precise, merciless, devastating, sending icy shivers racing down your spine and tears of pure, cathartic release streaming down your face. If tales of quiet, broken underdogs rising to crush arrogant thieves make your blood sing with rage, grief, and fragile hope, this one is built to hook you so deep you won't be able to breathe until the final word. Every clap for Marcy felt like a physical blow, each one landing harder than the last, bruising something deep inside me that I thought had already healed. I would stand in the back, arms crossed so tightly my nails dug into my palms, forcing a smile while my chest burned with silent screams. The room would fill with laughter and praise, and I would feel myself shrinking, becoming smaller with every word of admiration directed at her. It was as if the air itself conspired against me, pressing down, suffocating, reminding me of every time I'd been told to be quiet, to be useful, to disappear. And yet, beneath the pain, something else was growing, something dark, dangerous, and unstoppable. The rage wasn't loud at first. It was a slow burn, a quiet ember that glowed hotter with every stolen idea, every fake smile, every time she looked through me like I didn't exist. I would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would feel like to finally speak, to finally be heard. The fantasies grew darker, visions of her standing alone, exposed, while the room turned to look at me instead. I hated myself for those thoughts, but I couldn't stop them. They were the only thing keeping me from breaking completely. The streets of Portland at night are treacherous in their beauty, slick with rain, reflecting the neon glow of signs that promise warmth and belonging, but deliver only cold isolation. I would walk home alone after late nights at the pantry, the city lights blurring through my tears, each step heavier than the last. The puddles reflected my face back at me, tired, hollow, invisible. I would stare into them, wondering if anyone would notice if I simply disappeared. And yet, the thought of the families depending on me kept me moving forward, one foot in front of the other, through the storm. The corporate room where it all ended felt like a different world, cold, sterile, filled with the scent of expensive coffee and polished ambition. Every time I stepped inside, I felt like an intruder, like my worn jeans and hoodie didn't belong among the crisp blazers and confident smiles. But that day, when the truth finally came out, the room transformed. The air crackled with something electric, dangerous, alive. For once, I wasn't the one shrinking. I was the one standing tall, while Marcy crumbled before my eyes. This story doesn't just touch something primal, it claws into the marrow of your bones because it's woven from the deepest, most jagged threads of my own childhood trauma, the kind of pain that never fades, only lies in wait to be triggered again and again. It's about finally refusing to be invisible after a lifetime of being made small, of being told your voice doesn't matter, of watching others take what you built while you stand in the shadows crying inside. As every layer rips open, you'll feel every heartbeat of rage, every tear of grief, every shudder of long-denied triumph that makes your chest ache with the weight of it all. The pain of those years wasn't just emotional, it was physical. I remember the ache in my stomach from hunger, the way my hands would shake from cold and exhaustion, the constant tension in my shoulders from carrying burdens too heavy for a child. I learned to move silently, to breathe quietly, to exist without being noticed. That silence became my shield, but it also became my cage. Every time someone looked past me, every time my contributions were ignored, it was like another lock clicking shut. When Marcy walked in and began her campaign of erasure, it wasn't just about the pantry anymore. It was about every time I'd been made to feel small, every time I'd swallowed my voice, every time I'd let someone else take credit for my work. The rage that had been simmering for decades finally reached a boiling point. I could feel it in my bones, in my blood, in every breath I took. And I knew that if I didn't fight back, I would lose myself completely. The danger wasn't just professional, it was personal. Marcy didn't stop at stealing credit, she began to whisper poison into the ears of the other volunteers, planting seeds of doubt about my motives, my competence, my very presence. "She's too quiet," she'd say with a sweet smile. "Maybe she's hiding something." Every word was a dagger, every glance a warning. I started to feel watched, hunted, like prey in a room full of predators. The sanctuary I had built was turning into a cage, and I was the one locked inside. My childhood was a constant, quiet war of invisibility. I was the middle child in a house where love was stretched so thin it barely reached anyone. My older brother was the loud one, the one who got the attention with his tantrums and triumphs. My younger sister was the baby, fragile and always needing protection. I learned early that the best way to survive was to be useful, silent, and unseen. I cleaned up messes no one asked me to, folded laundry before anyone noticed it was dirty, made sure the fridge had something, anything, for dinner when my mom worked double shifts. But usefulness doesn't earn praise, it earns expectation. I became the ghost in my own home, the one who held everything together while everyone else got to shine. I would spend hours in my room, organizing my books, my clothes, my thoughts, anything to feel like I had control over something. The house was always loud, my brother shouting, my sister crying, my mom sighing, but I was the silence between the noise. I would sit on my bed, knees drawn to my chest, listening to the chaos outside my door, knowing that if I spoke up, I would only add to it. So I stayed quiet, invisible, useful. And I hated myself for it. The nights were the worst. I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to my mom cry in the kitchen when she thought we were asleep. I wanted to go to her, to hold her, to tell her it would be okay. But I didn't. I stayed in my room, silent, because that's what I'd been taught. That's what I'd become. And that silence followed me into adulthood, into the pantry, into every moment until Marcy forced me to face it. I remember one particular school project, a science fair display I'd spent weeks perfecting. I stayed up late every night, cutting out pictures, writing explanations, building a model that actually worked. When the day came, my teacher praised it in front of the class, but my brother, who hadn't done anything, stood beside me and accepted the compliments with a grin. I stood there, silent, while everyone clapped for him. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was used to it. But inside, something broke. That childhood wound never scarred over, it just went quiet. It waited. And when Marcy walked into the pantry and started erasing me all over again, it roared back to life with a vengeance that nearly broke me. Every stolen credit, every time she took my idea and made it hers, felt like my mother turning away once more, like my brother getting the applause I had earned in silence. The pantry was supposed to be the place where I finally got to matter, and instead, it became the battlefield where all my old ghosts came to fight me again. The first time Marcy took credit for one of my ideas, I felt the familiar sting of invisibility, but this time it was different. This time, I wasn't a child. This time, I had something to lose, something I'd fought for, bled for, cried for. The rage was no longer just a whisper, it was a roar building inside me, threatening to tear through every wall I'd built to keep it contained. And I knew that if I didn't fight back, I would lose more than just credit. I would lose myself. I started to notice the little things, the way she would glance at me when no one was looking, the way her smile never reached her eyes, the way she would linger near my desk, watching, waiting. I felt hunted, cornered, like prey in a room full of predators. And yet, I stayed silent. I told myself it was better to endure, to keep the peace, to be useful. But every day, the silence grew heavier, more dangerous, until I could barely breathe under its weight. The shame of those years still lingers in quiet moments. I remember standing in the kitchen at night, the only light coming from the open fridge door, staring at the nearly empty shelves and feeling like I had failed my family simply by existing. I would take the last slice of bread and cut it into 3 equal pieces, making sure my siblings had more, convincing myself that my hunger was less important. That habit of self-erasure followed me into adulthood, making me the perfect volunteer, always there, always working, always silent. Until Marcy arrived and turned that lifelong survival strategy into a weapon against me. If you've ever felt the searing, bone-deep, soul-shattering agony of someone hijacking your hard-earned success, twisting your blood, sweat, tears, and every sleepless night into their glittering crown while you're left choking on dust and despair, or endured the soul-crushing, suffocating invisibility as they bask in stolen praise that echoes like cruel laughter in your ears, and you've fantasized, with trembling hands, burning eyes, and a heart that feels like it's breaking all over again, about the moment their entire facade shatters into 1,000 jagged, irreparable pieces, then smash that like button with every ounce of pent-up fury, grief, and hope you've ever swallowed, feeling the satisfying crack under your thumb like the first crack in their armor. Subscribe now to plunge headfirst into a world of emotionally devastating Reddit revenge stories that set your sense of justice ablaze. Turn on notifications so every heart-stopping tale lands in your feed like a thunderclap that shakes your whole body. And brace yourself for narratives that don't just tell a story, they rip your heart open, bleed it dry, and stitch it back together stronger, fiercer, and finally whole. These stories aren't entertainment, they're raw, gut-wrenching, cathartic explosions of karma that reach into the darkest, most wounded corners of your soul and remind you, with brutal tenderness, that justice can still exist, that your pain matters, that you are not invisible. By liking and subscribing, you're joining a tribe of survivors who refuse to let the thieves win, who weep and cheer when the mighty fall and the quiet ones rise. Don't miss the rush, hit those buttons and let's dive into this storm together, hearts pounding, breaths ragged, tears falling. Each like is fuel for more stories that cut straight to the marrow. Each subscription strengthens our shared cry for fairness, for recognition, for healing. If the thought of watching a credit thief's empire of lies crumble in real time sends a shiver of vicious, righteous satisfaction racing through every vein, act now. We're about to tear open a saga more gripping, more painful, more triumphant than any thriller you've ever known. Let's go. These tales remind us that revenge isn't always loud and flashy. Sometimes it's the quiet, devastating, soul-deep burn of truth that leaves the guilty scorched beyond recognition and the wronged finally, achingly whole. Dive in, and let the emotions crash over you like a tidal wave, because you deserve to feel this. These stories are for every person who has ever felt their contributions erased, their voice drowned out, their existence reduced to background noise. They are for the ones who learned to stay small so others could feel big, who carried invisible burdens while the world applauded the wrong people. They are proof that the quiet ones can still roar when the time is right. They are also a reminder that healing isn't linear. Some wounds reopen just when you think they've closed. But when they do, there is power in facing them head-on, in letting the pain fuel something greater than silence. That's what this story became for me, not just revenge, but reclamation. They are a testament to the fact that the most devastating betrayals often come from the people who claim to be on your side. The ones who smile while they steal, who applaud your work while quietly claiming it as their own. And when the mask finally falls, the truth is more liberating than any victory speech. They remind us that sometimes the greatest revenge isn't loud or dramatic, it's the simple, undeniable moment when the truth finally speaks for itself. And when that happens, the silence that follows is louder than any scream. These stories are not about destruction, they're about restoration. About taking back what was stolen, not just credit, but dignity, worth, and the right to be seen. They are about the moment when the invisible become impossible to ignore. They are about the terrifying realization that the person you trusted most could become your greatest threat, and the even more terrifying moment when you realize you have the power to end them. They are about the moment when the quiet one finally speaks, and the world listens. Hey, it's Catherine again. I live in Portland, Oregon, the city of endless gray rain that soaks through your clothes, your skin, your very bones until you wonder if you'll ever feel warm again, where artisanal coffee shops glow like fragile beacons on every corner, filling the misty air with the rich, nutty scent of freshly ground beans that promise comfort you can never quite hold on to, and a weary, beautiful community of do-gooders who keep showing up despite everything. That's how I ended up at this tiny nonprofit community pantry, a flickering, fragile beacon of hope in a weathered brick building where the air always carried the faint metallic bite of canned goods mixed with the dusty, earthy tang of cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling like silent prayers. It was supposed to be my sanctuary, the place where I could finally pour my broken heart into helping others and outrun the ghosts that had haunted me since childhood. But beneath the surface, chaos simmered like a pot about to boil over, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a swarm of angry wasps waiting to sting. But this wasn't just volunteer work, it was survival, it was redemption, it was the only way I knew how to quiet the screaming inside. Growing up, my mom worked 2 jobs and still came home with hollow eyes and an empty wallet. We relied on food banks that were always short, always chaotic, always failing us in small, soul-crushing ways, expired milk that made us sick, missing diapers that left my baby sister crying all night, the constant, gnawing dread of empty shelves and empty stomachs. I remember standing in line at 8 years old, clutching her cold hand, feeling the shame burn in my cheeks like acid as we were handed whatever scraps were left, knowing we were the last ones, the ones nobody wanted to see. That helplessness carved a hollow, aching place inside me that never healed, only grew bigger with every year. As an adult with a steady admin job, I swore on every scar I carried that I would never let another family feel that same cold, choking knot of fear and shame. The pantry became my battlefield, my confessional, my desperate attempt to rewrite the story I'd lived as a terrified little girl. The pantry wasn't just shelves and boxes, it was a fragile, trembling lifeline, the metal racks groaning under the weight of donations that could mean the difference between a child going to bed full or crying from hunger, the soft creak echoing like a heartbeat in the quiet, sacred moments. Yet when I started last spring, it was a war zone, items vanishing into thin air like they'd never existed, leaving only the stale, mocking whisper of empty spaces behind, accusations slicing through the air like knives and hushed, venomous tones that made my stomach twist, distrust poisoning every breath we took, thick and choking like smoke from a dying fire. My day job had sharpened my organizational skills to a razor's edge, but this was so much more than work. It was personal, it was visceral, it was every hungry night I'd endured staring back at me. I couldn't stand by while good intentions rotted into suspicion and waste, the bitter taste of betrayal coating my tongue the same way it had when I was a little girl watching my mother cry over an empty fridge. Driven by a fire that burned hotter than any Portland drizzle could ever cool, I dove in headfirst, volunteering to tear down their broken system and build something unbreakable, something sacred. Late nights blurred into one another, rain pounding the window like fists demanding entry, matching the frantic, terrified rhythm of my heart as I crafted a foolproof setup from nothing but sheer will, desperation, and every tear I'd ever swallowed. It was my creation, born from every hungry night, every empty cupboard, every time I pretended I wasn't starving so my mom wouldn't cry harder, fueled by the vow that no one else would ever feel that same despair. Those late nights were brutal beyond words. Memories would flood in without mercy, my mom's exhausted, broken sighs filling our tiny kitchen, the hollow clink of empty cans in the cupboard like accusations, the way I'd curl into a ball on my mattress and pretend I wasn't hungry so she wouldn't cry harder. I'd push through anyway, tears blurring the screen, sobs catching in my throat, determined that my pain would become someone else's salvation, that the little girl I used to be would finally be proud of me. I never imagined this act of healing, this desperate offering of my heart, would soon become the stage for the deepest, most shattering betrayal of my life. Every evening I spent building that system felt like I was stitching together pieces of my broken past. I would sit in the dark with only the glow of the laptop screen, my fingers trembling as I typed, whispering to myself that this time, the little girl who went to bed hungry would finally win. The pantry wasn't just a place to volunteer. It was a shrine to the child I used to be, a promise that her suffering wouldn't be repeated. And that made Marcy's theft feel like sacrilege. I started last spring, my hands still rough and calloused from endless typing at my day job, but my spirit blazing with fragile, trembling hope. The pantry was utter chaos, an ancient spreadsheet riddled with mistakes, its lines smudged like rain-smeared ink on wet paper, donations slipping away like sand through broken fingers, volunteers glaring at each other with barely concealed suspicion over who was taking the good stuff, the fresh, herbal-scented organics that smelled like life, the smooth, powdery unexpired baby formula that could quiet a crying infant, the rare treats that could light up a child's face amid the musty gloom. It ripped my heart open wider than ever, seeing the very system that once failed me now failing others, the frustration twisting in my chest like barbed wire soaked in salt. So, with tears of determination streaking my face in the dim light of my apartment, I rolled up my sleeves and built something revolutionary. Evenings after work became my war room, my laptop screen glowing like a lone beacon in the dark, scented with cold takeout and cooling coffee, fingers flying over keys as I designed a system that would never fail, meticulous sign-in sheets scratched out with the sharp bite of pen on paper, numbered bins standing like silent guardians, swift snapshots of high-value items with the decisive click of the shutter, weekly anonymous social media posts that celebrated generosity without feeding egos. The transformation was breathtaking, donations surged like a flood, errors vanished into nothing, toxic whispers dissolved into laughter, the room alive with the soft rustle of grateful hands packing bags. But the true miracle was in the faces. Families who used to leave empty-handed now walked out with full arms and shining eyes, the crinkle of plastic bags sounding like hope itself, children giggling with high-pitched, disbelieving joy as they clutched new toys, their laughter warming the cold concrete like sunlight, volunteers sharing real, tearful smiles instead of forced politeness. My system wasn't just efficient, it was redemption, it was love made tangible, breathing life into a dying place, turning the air from despair to fragile, trembling, miraculous hope. Yet I never saw the storm coming, the shadow that would try to steal it all and reopen every wound I'd fought so hard, so desperately, to close. Seeing those families leave with dignity, with full hearts and full arms, healed something broken inside me, a quiet, trembling balm on scars I'd carried for decades. But it also left me raw, exposed, my heart laid bare in every numbered bin, every anonymous post, every moment I dared to believe I could make a difference. That vulnerability would soon become my greatest strength, and the very thing that almost destroyed me. Then Marcy showed up, bursting in like a thunderclap that shatters every window in your soul, her sharp heels clicking on the linoleum like gunfire in a sacred space. Marcy was loud, obnoxiously, aggressively, cruelly loud, a manufactured whirlwind of charisma that sucked the oxygen from the room, leaving behind the choking, suffocating cloud of her overpowering floral perfume that clung to your skin like guilt you didn't earn. With her perfectly highlighted hair catching every light like a stolen halo, flowy scarves fluttering with each dramatic, performative gesture, and a voice that boomed off the metal shelves like a siren demanding worship, she announced, "I'm here to give back." Her words reverberating like a declaration of war in the one place I'd finally felt safe. At first, I welcomed her energy, desperate, aching to believe the pantry needed her fire, that maybe her brightness could help heal what was broken. Her laughter rang out like forced bells, filling the space I'd worked so hard, so tearfully, to make safe. But beneath the gloss was something cold, predatory, eyes glinting with ruthless calculation, always watching, always waiting to pounce. She'd hover like a vulture, absorbing every idea like a parasite, then spit it back out as her own brilliant revelation moments later, the theft so smooth it almost felt accidental, but the sting was razor sharp, cutting straight to the bone. Her arrival dragged every buried memory screaming to the surface, school bullies stealing my projects while teachers praised them with smiles I'd never earned, family gatherings where my quiet, endless help went unnoticed while louder voices took every credit, every hug, every acknowledgement. She wasn't just stealing my work, she was stealing my childhood all over again, making me feel small, invisible, worthless in the very sanctuary I'd built to finally feel seen. The pain was so deep it stole my breath. Marcy's backstory was one of those polished tales she loved to tell, always with a dramatic flair that made her sound like a hero in her own movie. She came from a well-to-do family in a suburban Portland neighborhood, where her father was a mid-level executive and her mother ran a boutique. From what she shared in casual conversations, she had always been the center of attention at home, the golden child who excelled in school plays and debate clubs, collecting trophies and praise like they were her birthright. But beneath that facade, she hinted at a pressure cooker of expectations. Her parents pushed her relentlessly, and any failure was met with disappointment that cut deep. She once confessed, in a rare moment of vulnerability, that she volunteered to give back as a way to prove her worth beyond the superficial successes, but it felt more like she was chasing the spotlight to fill a void left by never feeling truly valued for who she was, not what she achieved. As I got to know her more, it became clear that Marcy's loud personality was a shield. She had moved to Portland after a messy breakup with a fiancé who, according to her, didn't appreciate her ambition. She threw herself into volunteer work as a rebound, but it seemed like she was using it to rebuild her image, posting about her journey of self-discovery on social media, where her followers ate up the narrative of the glamorous woman turning philanthropist. Deep down, I sensed her backstory was riddled with insecurities. She mentioned offhand how her siblings were the smart ones in the family, leaving her to rely on charm and volume to stand out. That drive to be seen, to claim credit even when it wasn't hers, probably stemmed from years of feeling overshadowed, but it didn't excuse how she trampled over others to get her fix of validation. It made her actions all the more tragic and infuriating, knowing she was repeating the cycle of erasure she'd perhaps experienced herself. The pattern emerged like poison seeping into an open wound, slow, insidious, and excruciating. I'd suggest something simple. Maybe we should number the bins to protect high-value items? My voice trembling with fragile hope, words hanging in the buzzing air like a prayer. Minutes later, Marcy would seize the spotlight, voice booming with unshakable, cruel confidence. "I think we should number the bins. It's such a brilliant idea I just had." The room would erupt in applause, her charisma blinding them to the robbery happening in plain sight, the sound of their claps like slaps across my face, each one reopening a wound I thought had scarred over. My stomach would twist into knots of betrayal, bile, and tears rising in my throat, but I'd swallow it all down, whispering to myself through clenched teeth, "It's just volunteer work, Catherine. Don't make a scene," the words tasting like ash, blood, and broken dreams. Yet the violations grew bolder, each one a fresh, bleeding wound carved deeper into my heart. She flooded social media with selfies, arms flung wide in fake, mocking triumph, dazzling smile dominating every frame, captions screaming, "Look what I built this week." While I stood blurred, broken in the background, face flushed and streaked with sweat, arms trembling from the weight of boxes, tears of exhaustion, rage, and grief burning behind my eyes. It was a public execution of my worth, and every like she received felt like another nail driven into my coffin. New volunteers arrived wide-eyed and full of hope, footsteps hesitant on the sticky floor, only for Marcy to descend like a vulture. "Hi. I'm Marcy. I basically revamped this whole operation from the ground up." Her voice would boom with unshakable, cruel confidence while I clutched my clipboard until my knuckles turned white and bled, feeling myself shrink into nothing, the disrespect igniting a wildfire of rage that scorched every inch of my being, leaving nothing but ash and pain. I fought to keep breathing, pouring every shattered piece of my soul into the mission, watching families leave with full bags and light in their eyes, hearing children's laughter echo like medicine for my hemorrhaging heart. But inside, the fury boiled, hot, relentless, volcanic, threatening to erupt and consume everything. The betrayal wasn't just professional, it was existential, a reopening of every scar I'd carried since childhood, a vicious reminder that no matter how hard I tried, someone would always try to erase me. Each stolen credit felt like a slap from the past, every time I'd been overlooked at home, every time a teacher praised someone else for my work, every time I'd stayed silent to keep the peace while my heart screamed. This wasn't about bins or spreadsheets anymore. It was about a lifetime of being made to feel invisible finally boiling over into something unstoppable, something that would either destroy me or set me free. The breaking point erupted like a volcano that had been dormant for decades, shattering every ounce of restraint I had left, the air crackling with the electricity of long-suppressed, white-hot rage. A golden opportunity appeared like a miracle, a local business offering small grants to non-profits that could prove real, measurable impact, the promise shimmering like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Our director, Lisa, a gentle, exhausted woman in her 50s whose eyes carried the weight of 1,000 unshed tears, her shirts forever stained with coffee like badges of endless, silent sacrifice, pulled me aside, voice trembling with quiet desperation. "Catherine, you've mastered the numbers. Can you make something that will save us?" Her plea landed like a stone in my chest, heavy with the fear she could never voice, heavy with the weight of every family depending on us. And so, as the rain continues to fall outside my window tonight, washing away the last traces of that long, brutal storm, I finally feel the weight lift, not just from my shoulders, but from my very soul. What began as a quiet act of survival became a fierce declaration of worth. Marcy's empire of lies didn't just crumble, it shattered into dust, and from those ashes, I rose, seen, heard, and finally whole. The little girl who once stood silent in food bank lines now stands tall, knowing her voice matters, her work matters, her existence matters. And if my story can reach even one person who's been made to feel invisible, who's carried the same invisible burdens, who's waited years for someone to finally say "I see you," then every tear, every sleepless night, every moment of rage was worth it. If this story stirred something deep inside you, if it made your heart pound with recognition, your fists clench with shared fury, and your eyes burn with the promise of your own long overdue justice, then please, right now, smash that like button with every ounce of pent-up emotion you've ever swallowed. Let the algorithm know that stories of quiet warriors rising, of truth finally roaring louder than any lie, deserve to be heard by everyone who's ever been erased. And if you want more raw, gut-wrenching, soul-healing revenge tales that remind you you're not alone in this fight, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss the next thunderclap of karma. Thank you for walking through every dark corner of this story with me, for crying with me, raging with me, and healing with me. You are seen. You are enough. Until next time, stay fierce, stay healing, and never stop fighting for your light. Goodbye for now.